again. We know this is what we're meant to do. So we wake up, put our feet on the floor, go and conquer the day like a warrior, like warriors. Cause that's what a tribe does. We got your back so you can relax and focus on all the important stuff, like getting your business done. This is our tribe. We look out for each other. That's right, that's right. This is our tribe. We help each other grow in business and life. That's right, that's right. No need to panic anymore. We got lots of support and an army of warriors by our side. We fight the good fight when we unite. We fight the good fight when we unite. Cause that's what a tribe does. We got your back so you can relax and focus on all the important stuff, like getting your business done. This is our tribe. We look out for each other. That's right, that's right. This is our tribe. We help each other grow in business and life. That's right, that's right. This
Hi, everybody. My name is Sondra Ray, and I can't find the mute button today. Welcome to the Coffee Shop Show. My name is Sondra Ray. I am here with the amazing Peter from Explore ProTech. Our show is about helping businesses, startups, small businesses, medium businesses, do all the things, grow your business, start your business, and everything in between. We take topics and break them down based on our experience and experts that we bring onto the show, with the mission of helping businesses grow. Internationally, we are international. We are literally on the opposite, almost the opposite sides of the world. So good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Today's topic is about being, okay, wait, let me back up. We've been talking about marketing for about 5 weeks, 6 weeks now. And today's topic is about being a podcast guest. Not about having a podcast, but being a guest and how to use that as a marketing strategy. Being a podcast guest, a lot of the times it's free. So it's a really good tool when used correctly and efficiently. So, yeah, so we're going to deep dive, we're going to dive into that for a little bit. Peter, let's check in with you. How are you today?
Actually, surprisingly well. Surprisingly well. It's been very cold. Very, very cold. Hence the neck warmer. And my heater seems to be tripping the power. So no heater for me at the moment. I'll make a fire later.
And we're on the other side of the world where it's blazing hot and AC is blaring, and knock on wood, my AC has been doing better. We kind of came up with the system of you have to spray down the outside unit to keep the inside unit. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So yeah, we're definitely the opposite side of that. So it's always very interesting. Awesome, awesome. So I want to talk from my experience because I have been a guest on podcasts. Um, the biggest thing about being a podcast guest is figuring out what podcast you should be on. There's step one. Like what podcast should you be on? I don't even know. I should have looked up a stat, but I'm sure there's probably a good million podcasts. I mean, to be honest, there's podcasts for everything and everyone. You can put in a topic into, Apple Podcast or Spotify or anywhere else that you listen to podcasts and pretty much get probably a good, hundreds and hundreds of results. So this goes back to what we've talked about prior in the year about knowing your audience. Where does your audience hang out? Do they listen to podcasts about self-development? Do they listen to podcasts about being coached? Do they listen to podcasts about being a coach, being a business owner, being neurodivergent, being a mom, being a dad, owning multiple businesses, and everything in between. So figuring out what your ideal audience is listening to is extremely important. And it might not have anything directly to do about your what you're giving the audience. It might have to be more about what they want to listen to and what they like to listen to. Um, and maybe it's an audience that you don't think is your ideal audience, but they might know somebody or they might need your services. So you kind of have to explore this a little bit and do trial and error, definitely. Um, and like I said, there's lots and lots and lots of podcasts out there. One thing I can say about being podcast guest is be organized when you're pitching to podcasts because it's very, very easy to lose track of who did you pitch, where did you pitch. Then you have a meeting with them 3 weeks later, and then you're like, how do we meet? What are we talking about? Been there, done that. I love a Trello board for that because it's so much easier to keep who did I pitch to, who am I meeting with, and how did it progress. The other thing you need to know about podcasts is if you're doing something that's going to be, I don't know, 30 days out, a lot of podcast people batch record. So they might record you today, but they don't put your episode out until 6 months from now, 9 months from now. So knowing that is important because if you're wanting to promote something that you're doing in the next couple of weeks, it might not work out. So that is one thing when you're pitching to a podcast, say, hey, do you batch record? How quickly do you turn around an episode? Because if you're going to pitch, and most podcasts will let you pitch something, whether it's just talking about yourself or an event or both. Keep that in mind because you don't want somebody pitching something. You don't want to pitch something that comes out 3 months after the offer expires or something crazy, and you're just like, wait, I have to make good on that because I pitched that. So just keep that in mind. I know that's a little caveat, but definitely doing that. And then some other things when you're pitching the podcast is also asking how their format is. Some podcasts are very format heavy where they're like question, answer, question, answer. They send you the questions ahead of time, you answer them, and there's not a lot of wiggle room or a lot of ad lib. That's the word I was looking for. And then some are just a conversation. They just want to chat back and forth. I prefer the back and forth conversation type podcast, honestly, as a podcast guest. But some people want to know, like, what are you going to ask me? These are my answers. And I've done a couple that way. That wasn't my comfort zone. Definitely try both because you might find you like both, depending on who the person is too. So listen, and this is the other thing I would say. And I'm noticing more and more podcast people owners are doing this. Listen to a couple of shows so you know the personality of the person that's going to be talking to you or interviewing you or whatever. So if I ask you to be an expert on my show, I would want you to go watch the show so you know who Peter is, so you know who I am. Know that we have other Explore ProTech people on here, and it's kind of a round table. And I was explaining that format to next week's guest. So asking when you're pitching yourself, say, hey, I liked episode so da 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 with da da da. It makes it to the people that are running the podcast, it makes them understand that you really are interested in being on their show and that you took the time to listen to a couple episodes. And again, I've seen that more and more recently that on applications, they'll be like, hey, tell us your favorite episode, or hey, tell us something about episode blah, blah, blah. Because they want to make sure that you understand what they generally talk about and what they do in their format before you pitch to them and be like, I'm a perfect guest for you. Well, why? And you can't answer the why, then you might be in trouble. So, and then they'll be like, hey, you didn't take the time to do X, Y, and Z. The other thing about pitching the podcasts, a lot of them have applications, follow the instructions. Because a lot of times there's like a little caveat. Put the word green in this part because they don't want those AI generated people. They don't want AI to be generating. They want real people answering their applications. Yes, can you format some of your answers to the questions? Of course. But pay attention to the instructions because usually there's just a little thing that if you've read fully, you'll see it, and then you can answer that, and it's going to put you at the top of that list that you were looking at the details. Awesome. Peter, I know you've been on podcasts before, and I know you know podcast people, so come on in.
Yeah, I think first things first, let's understand that podcasts are marketing, both for the guest and for the host. So for the host, the more followers they have, the more people see the show, the more of a viable space it is for guests to be when they want to market what it is that they are doing or selling or creating or building or whatever it is. So it's a two-way street. Um, if you are approaching a particular podcast, you're approaching them because they have a particular audience and they have a very particular number of followers that are following that podcast, and you want to access that. You want to put your product or your creation in front of those people. But at the same time, to make it a two-way street, you don't just rely on their followers. You flip the script and you actually have your followers follow their podcast. So your followers are seeing your content, and so is the host's followers. So that's how you're scratching each other's backs in regards to does your host have a following and does the guest have a following? And can you get both followings to follow one podcast to get as many eyes on the podcast as possible? So it's not just a thing of, oh, I'm going to be a guest and I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to arrive and rely on their followers. Don't do that. That's not being a good guest. That's just being a lazy guest. And it's very attractive to podcast hosts when you arrive with the mentality of, I have a following, but I don't do a podcast. So therefore, I'm going to be a guest on a podcast. And I'm going to push my following to view your content because I'm going to be on your content. That for a podcast host, yes, please, because they want to grow. Just as much as you want to sell your product or your idea, or you spread the word of a new thought or something that's new that's happening, just as much as you want to do that, they want to grow at the same time. So it's a mutually beneficial space when you have, and even if you have very few followers, it's still the mentality behind it of, I'm going to get my followers to follow this, to view me, but you benefit at the same time. Another thing that, Sondra, you already mentioned that I think is very important. If you're going to be on a podcast, first of all, know what type of podcast it's going to be, whether structured or whether unstructured. Is it off the cuff? Is it question for question? You want to know that. Don't just arrive and go, how does this work? You need to already know how it works. So in order to know how it works, like Sondra said previously, go and watch previous episodes. It's not difficult. Go and watch previous episodes and see how do they structure it. Then you know when you arrive that it is structured in this particular fashion and you are prepared for it. If it's something that's very structured, you know that you've received the questions, you know that you've answered those questions. Then you know that your host is prepared because your host has sent you those questions to answer them so that they have the answers, so they know exactly the direction that the podcast is going to go in, and so do you. If it's off the cuff, then you might want to get some form of direction as to more or less what is the conversation going to be about from their side, from the host's side. Based on the answers to that, you want to maybe create 2 or 3 storylines that you can follow off the cuff. You're prepared, but it's still off the cuff. You've prepared, I'm going to be speaking about this topic and this topic and that topic, and I know exactly what I'm going to say about each topic. So it's off the cuff, but it's still prepared. The last thing you want to do is arrive at a podcast and they start asking questions and you didn't know they were going to ask that and you don't really have an answer. Don't do that. That just doesn't make for a very good show at all. So both parties have to be prepared. Don't make the mistake of just arriving and think everything's going to happen for you. No, be prepared, know what you're going to speak about. I also think there's a thing of beauty when podcasters end up on each other's shows. That's beautiful. I mean, that to me, I think is absolutely stunning. I know we did recently actually invite one group of podcasters to be on another group of podcasters' show, and for them to actually share in the spoils of followers and backwards and forwards. That to me is a thing of beauty, and everybody benefits. The podcaster, the guests, everybody wins. So I think as a guest, figure out how much can you do for the host because you already know what the host is doing for you.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And um, as somebody who produces a podcast show and then actually works for a client who does a podcast, um, you know, a good, but we're going from the guest perspective. Um, yes, definitely know what this show is about. Is it going to affect your audience, or do you need to tweak something in how you present yourself in this podcast? So maybe, I don't know. We know a virtual photographer and she likes to work with vets. So she's going to tailor her answers toward that industry or that, the audience that's going to be that. So I'm a coach and I help people get things done. But if I am talking in a self-development, I'm going to talk about how self-development fits into what I'm doing or my experience, or I'm going to tie that into what you do in your business. You're going to tie that industry into your business because you're not always going to go, oh, a coach for a coach, or entrepreneur for an entrepreneur. So definitely do that. And then the other thing is yeah, have some unexpected answers because I do know podcast people do sometimes want to ask that, one unusual question or something. So have a couple of answers of like, um, Peter was saying, being prepared is extremely essential. Also, know your links and know how people can get a hold of you. Make sure you've tested your links. I have beta tested for many, many people, and I still do it even when I do coffee chats, I'm like, hey, I went on your page and this link doesn't work. Like I'm all the time checking and then vice versa. I want people to check my links. So check your links because they're going to be in their show notes, they're going to be in their audience, and it's going to make it look not great if your stuff doesn't work. Um, or if you offer a freebie and the freebie is, I don't know, breaks halfway through the process or whatever. So check your stuff before you're on a podcast if you're going to offer something or whatever links you're going to do so that it doesn't make you look bad. It doesn't make the host look bad either. So definitely do that. And then also find out where the podcast people um, what platform they're using, where do they advertise? Are you on that platform? I mean, be honest. They say, hey, are you on Twitter or X or whatever it's called? Are you on this or not? Don't just go create an account because it's not helpful to them. Like I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn. Those are my platforms. And they'll be like, cool, I am or I am not. Don't what I want to say, don't just do something to get onto a podcast by go create an account because that's just, I don't know, to me, that's not truthful. You don't have a following. People are going to be like, okay, yeah, they have a Twitter account, and they haven't used it in 2 years, which is mine. It's there. It's haven't touched it in forever. That's why I keep calling Twitter, and it's not even Twitter, it's X. So definitely don't misrepresent yourself. I guess that's the word I'm looking for. Don't misrepresent yourself. If you're on a platform, you're on a platform. Your links should be your links. They should work. You should have tested them. Um, and then, yeah, promote. And then the other thing is a lot of podcast people will, you sign off, they can do their podcast is their podcast. So they can use pieces of it, chunks of it. I had somebody publish, a reel off of an interview I did like 2 years ago, and he just posted it the other day. He's like repurposing his content, which is what you're supposed to do. I'm like, oh, cool. I'm going to share this. This is a highlight for me. Do the same. Repurpose those podcasts. Take them, break them down. Make sure you know the rights that you have to do with whatever with the podcast content. Make sure if you don't understand that you ask. A lot of them have contracts or at least a form or something so you can ask those questions. But as a guest, use the content. Yeah, most of the time podcasts can be like, yeah, go use my content. Give me credit for doing the interview or our, mentioning our podcast for sure. So definitely use that to create create reels, create, content, of course, with the correct permissions and the correct tags on that. And then keep watching for them to do the same and share it. Just reshare it. Like it's so easy to reshare. Like I reshared, and I was like, cool way to learn about, I don't know, a goal I reached or something. It was like one line. I put it on the repurposed and moved along the way. He did all the work. He cut it up and made it into reels and all this stuff. I didn't have to do anything but reshare it. But you can do it, but also you can do that. Definitely do that same for as a podcast. And even if it's audio, you can do that for audio too. People do it. You just have to learn how to do those things. And of course, always give credit to that. And then when you're on, I've had questionnaires when I'm pitching to a podcast. They'll ask, what podcast have you been on recently? Or what podcast have you been on? Have you ever been on a podcast? There's where that Trello or whatever organization you're using, you can be like, yep, here's a link to this one, this one, this one, and then also track if you record something and you're like, I never seen that come out. Like go back and go, hey, did that episode ever come out? Or what happened? Or is it still in the bank of recordings? Be polite, of course, and nice about it. But I've had one where they're like, oh, we decided not to continue our podcast and it just sat in the bank, which is fine, but at least I knew I didn't have to watch for that episode anymore. But yeah, definitely ask questions and be prepared to ask questions for sure. And then of course, share. It's a win-win, like Peter said. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah, I think in order to enjoy what a podcast can actually give to you, you need to understand what a podcast is. And a podcast is basically utilizing the power of stories and sound to market. That's it. It's the power of sound and the power of a story, something that is attention grabbing. They're not relying on graphics. It's not a movie. You're not being put into a movie or an advert or anything like that. You are relying on the power of sound. So here's something that's really simple, and it's happened to me before, and I will be honest. Have you ever recorded your own voice and listened to yourself? I didn't like what I heard. I recorded myself and listened back, and I sounded like a 13-year-old boy whose voice had just broken. I sounded like a teenager with a high-pitched voice. It didn't sound very good. It didn't. So something very simple to actually do if you're going to be on a podcast, you need to understand that the podcast host is not just relying on what you're telling them, they're relying on the sound of your voice. So in order to get the best from the podcast, they are going to use sound engineering to get the best sound possible to promote and market the best way possible using sound. So myself and the team were on a podcast. The hosts were gracious enough to edit it to create the best podcast. And when we heard the results, I sounded like James Bond. It was brilliant. It was absolutely brilliant. I loved it. I sounded so smooth. Absolutely, it was a fantastic job. Even the way they put it together was absolutely brilliant. The way it all lined up was absolutely brilliant. And we need to understand that these are the things that hosts go through. It's not just, oh, we record and we send it out. There is a lot of work in the background. So anything that we can do from our side, I had to re-record certain parts of what they were asking me for. So we created a storyline, we created the answers, we created a script. I had to then read that script because we were in two different parts of the world. It's not like I could just go into a studio and record. Then it turned out that I had a lot of echo in the space that I was in, which was making it a nightmare for the person that was doing the recording. So my way around that was literally I sat in my office with a thick blanket over my head and over the screen and over my microphone to block out anything else around me, and sat with a torch and re-recorded to make a clean recording. for them to actually go and then afterwards, the results were brilliant. So find out from your host, what can I do to make your job easier? Because the less we do, the more they have to do. Can we record in can we create a little sound protected area? Doesn't take long, a couple of blankets and something to block a very echoey room. Um, maybe hang something up on the wall so you're not speaking against a wall that the sound is bouncing back. Very small things that you can actually do that take you a couple of minutes. Um, Go sit in a cupboard. It's the best recording space ever. You got a cupboard full of clothes? You want to record a podcast? Go sit in that cupboard. You will get studio quality recordings every time. Those hanging clothes just damper any other sound. You're not. Now, that sounds a bit weird. You getting in and out of the closet, but it's fine. Go make your recordings in there. If you can do very, very, very small things like that, give your host a sample of your voice in your normal environment. Give them a sample of your voice in a sound protected environment. You can go online and you can read up. What can I do to create a sound protected environment? A couple of egg boxes and some hanging clothes or a blanket or a curtain, or there are things that you can do. You can hang a curtain behind yourself. You can hang one in front of yourself. I had chairs and I strung up a piece of string across the room and I hung blankets on it to create an enclosed area that was sound protected. It's small stuff, but it makes the biggest difference.
For sure, for sure. Same thing with like if it's live or like we do, check your headphones, check your mic, check and make sure your Zoom or whatever platform, and I've gotten caught on this one. Somebody didn't use Zoom, they used Google Space or something else that I didn't look at the link, assumed it was Zoom, and it wasn't Zoom, and then went to get on the platform and I had to download the platform, didn't know how to put up a background, so I had to get my physical background out, and I was scrambling, and then of course that just makes you, all frustrated before you even start recording, and it was like, okay, take some deep breaths and stuff. So look into that, like where are they recording? How are they recording? My one client uses Ecamm. Like there's so many different types of recording platforms. Don't assume that it's Zoom, because again, I've gotten caught with that. Well, not more than once. And then yeah, check your sound, check your if you're using headphones, make sure they're noise cancellation. I was at my daughter's house 2 weeks ago. Y'all didn't have a clue. There was dogs and kids and TV and everything else. I might have been looking a little bit different because I was like trying to look around to make sure. But and then if you're using a virtual background, make sure what you have. There's actually people that do this. You can pay people to help style you for your backgrounds and like your color palette and all those things. I've done like a little consultation before, and check your hair, all those things, so that when you show up as a guest, you don't look, like you rolled out of bed, you don't have a proper background, or I'm not against blurry backgrounds, but to me, I'd rather have like either a fake background or your blank, like if that's your true background, fine, make sure it's cleaned up. No, the blurred backgrounds are just not my favorite, especially when you're on a podcast like this. And that's the other thing, if it's podcast, because podcast can not necessarily be visual. Like you said, you did a recording, so it can be just audio or it can be visual. So you need to know that too. Is this a video podcast where they're going to be on YouTube and they're going to use clips? Is it just audio? Knowing those things are really important so that you show up appropriately prepared. A prepared guest is going to get invited to more podcasts, because people are going to watch podcasts and be like, oh, okay, she showed up. And maybe she's having a bad day, but you didn't know she's having a day. Or maybe everything was going wrong. Um, you know, drink your water, like I always have cough drops, like just have things prepared beside you. I've put up notes on I do have multiple screens. I'm blessed with that. So I will put notes on other screens so that I can look back at those. I'm not much for, people will tell if you're reading. So if you can try to at least have an idea of what you're saying, but still have the words there, that also makes for a better podcast guest. And then, like we said, sharing, whether that's in your email list, on social media, all the above. And then give feedback. I know we ask for feedback all the time. And then my client, we send out a feedback form. We have maybe 1 out of 10 people fill out the feedback form. Like, it doesn't help you fill out the feedback form. If the host sends you a feedback form, please fill it out. As somebody that's on the other end of that, it's so helpful. And be honest. Like, I didn't like your format, or I didn't like this, or I like this, or you could have done this differently, or I did like this. In order to, give that feedback, because that's going to make them a better podcast host, and also shows that you give a dang. Just be honest. You give a dang. You took the 5 minutes to fill out a feedback form. And the other thing I would say is go like, subscribe, give a rating, like do those things. Help bump up the promotion, help promote the podcast. Simple things. Subscribe, like the episode, like other episodes, listen to other episodes, give a rating. Those don't take a lot of time. And again, it's going to show you that you were a guest, especially a lot of podcasts are free. There are some that you have to be paid, you have to pay to be on, but most podcasts, you're a free guest. The least you can give them is promotion, ratings, subscription, likes, all those things that help them grow as a podcast. And again, that's just you being a really good guest. Come on, go ahead, Peter.
True story, networking event with somebody that's arriving at the networking event. I think there must have been about 120 odd people at the event. And this person joined the event through Zoom and didn't realize that the moment they joined, their camera was going to be on. They were unprepared and literally got caught with their pants down. Don't be that person. Do not be that person. Be prepared. Otherwise, you're going to get caught with your pants down. Also have an understanding of aesthetically, where do you need to be positioned in regards to your camera? I mean, generally it's just below the shoulders and up. I mean, I think even now I'm showing too much in regards to being on a podcast. It would need to be shoulders up, centered, camera not looking up your nose, not looking down on your head, looking straight to your face. Camera positioned. I know some people have got really big screens and their camera's on top, and then they're looking at the screen and the camera's looking at them, so they're not looking at the audience. That doesn't work. You need to understand that your camera needs to be positioned in such a way that right now, even though I'm looking directly at my screen, I'm looking directly at my audience and not directly at my camera, but my camera is looking directly at me. So, and I've tested this before. I was like, oh yes, let's get a big screen. And I positioned a really big screen, and I was like, wait a second, now I'm talking to the audience like this. That just doesn't work. It does. You want to engage. So generally your webcam on a laptop is not good enough. Generally. You might want to get a proper HD webcam, something that has quality, not only for visual, because it's a podcast, but for audio. You want good quality audio. If you intend to be an online guest on a podcast, because you get different types of guests. You get in person, where people arrive in studio and they sit together with the host and they're utilizing the host's equipment that is provided, and it is set up the way the host wants it. You can also join virtually. If you intend to join many podcasts, then do yourself the service of figuring out what equipment do I need, because I can't rely on being in their studio. So what equipment do I actually need to get to make it the easiest for the host to actually then market that podcast. Is it a very particular microphone? Is it a very particular camera? Is it maybe like Jeff Bonanno in his beautiful sound protected room that he sits in when he does his voiceovers? What do you need to get? And get that. It's an investment into yourself. I know I've bought multiple different types of microphones. I've figured out that lapel mics don't work because you can give them a name. You can call them Russell because they scratch on everything. And then you can't record like that. I figured out that sometimes buying the cheaper stand on the side microphones don't work because then they pick up absolutely everything. Does your podcast host want you to sit there with headphones on? Yes, no, no. Okay, well then you need to get the appropriate microphone. So figure out what those things are because for every different space it's going to be completely different. So figure out what it is that you need and invest in that. It'll make your life easier. It'll make your host's life way easier. And then also if you're looking to get onto a different podcast and they go, now we need to check the quality of don't worry. I've got all the equipment I need to provide you with the voice that you're looking to hear. And without the excess background noise, without all those distractions, without all the things that have to be edited. We want to avoid that. So the more you set yourself up for success like that, the more you can actually go out there and go, I'm prepared and ready to be on your podcast. I've got the right subject matter. I line up with your podcast and I've got a quality sound and I've got a setup space that's designed specifically for me to be able to be your guest. They love that.
100%. Yeah, 100%. It makes it look more professional, like you give a dang and you're being professional and you're showing up for that. One thing we didn't cover, and we have a couple more minutes, is about what to say and not to say. So know what to say and not to say. Again, this goes back to knowing your audience and then also knowing the podcast audience. So I don't do politics. Like I'm not going to be on a political podcast because that is not my jam. That's not something I talk about publicly. So know that. And if there's something that is asked of you, how to graciously go around a question if it's not appropriate or something that you can get caught off guard by a host, and know how to be gracefully enough to, I don't want to say avoid, but say, hey, that's not something I'd answer, or how to turn that into something that's not super awkward while you're on there. And then your goal is to get your name out there and to get listeners or get leads. Basically, you're wanting to get leads. So give the listener information about what you do and how you're going to help them, not about how their problems are, or not negativity. Keep it positive. And again, if you're giving something away, make sure it's something that is ideal for your audience. Again, knowing your audience is extremely important. And same thing about like, if they ask where to find you and your audience is on Facebook, you're going to give your Facebook handle, or you're going to give your Instagram handle or whatever. So those things are great things to know ahead of time. And then again, if there's a topic that's taboo or something that you don't cover or is not great for your audience yourself, then know how to gracefully turn that question around. Or sometimes hosts will be like, is there something you don't want to talk about or something you avoid or whatever? Be honest about that so that you're not caught off guard and it's not awkward. Some people do live like we do. Some people do have where they can stop and edit and so forth. So knowing that is also important because ours is live. We don't re-record. It is what it is. It gets turned into Spotify. Again, so definitely knowing all those tips and tricks so that you sound professional and you help the podcast sound professional, or maybe it's not professional like streamlined professional. Maybe it is a fun podcast or whatever, but whatever that vibe is that you match that and you understand what it is and that you present yourself in the best way to promote yourself as a business owner and the podcast. Come on in as we wrap up, Mr. Peter.
Yeah, I think we also need to know what makes a podcast successful. And not necessarily just our episode, because this is homework we want to do before we go onto a podcast. We want to know how successful is that podcast that we're going to be on. And the way to figure that out is, I can sum it up in a few words: subscribers, 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 subscribers. So you can check how many subscribers they have. You can check what's their total amount of downloads, downloads over time. You can measure that. Average listening time. Those are things that you can actually figure out. There's another one. Reviews. That works. These are things that you can investigate to figure out, and then use history to figure out what's going to happen in the future, because that's the audience you're looking for. It doesn't help that you find a great podcast host, but they've got no subscribers, and because then they're relying on your subscribers. Then you're talking to your own audience. So do your homework beforehand. And if you are, as a guest, you don't have a podcast, you as a guest have loads of followers. They just follow your content, or they follow but you don't have a podcast, then do yourself a favor and do a podcast host a favor and allow them, or allow yourself to be a guest on their show and push their podcast because it lines up with your space. We as guests need to support the hosts as much as you think the hosts are supporting us. So, like I said, two-way street. It's got to line up.
Yeah, 100%. Make it a win-win. That's what we're talking about. And that's marketing. Basically, this does go back to marketing. You're marketing yourself, you're marketing podcasts, you're growing their business, and you're growing your business. And this helps them. This helps you as far as getting leads. This helps you be on other podcasts, other opportunities. So definitely do that. We have come to the end of our time, so we want to make sure we give a shout out to Susan, who does all the behind the scenes. She does our covers, our show notes, puts our links in the show notes, so you can click on that and schedule a time with either Peter or myself or any other guests that we have on shows. We always make sure we put their links in there. We do want feedback. We do want to hear how we can improve, what you like, what you don't like. That is important to us because the goal is to help entrepreneurs grow their business. That's what the coffee shop show is for. My name is Sondra. I'm the owner of Get It Done, and I help people get things done by helping them brain dump, streamline, set goals, figure out processes, resources, and pretty much anything else in between. So the goal is to get things done, not only in business, but also in life. Mr. Peter, can you take us out?
Awesome. As you've watched the show, do yourself a favor, go backwards in the shows. They all do line up. One topic leads to the next, leads to the next. Don't just jump to the end and go, yay, I've got it. Go backwards, view the shows that have got guests, or more than two people in the space. You want to meet those people. Those people are your lifeline. They're entrepreneurs from all over the world, and they all speak on different topics. So go backwards in the shows, figure out who those people are, reach out, speak to them. That's what they're there for. That being said, we've come to the end of our show, and we'll end it off with the phrase from our notorious, that makes it sound like a gangster, but anyway, our notorious co-founder, Nestine Botha. May all your wildest entrepreneurial dreams